What everyday skill becomes suspicious if you're too good at it? Tying a noose. At basic training, I got tasked to help the drill sergeants create their haunted house battalion competition. Long story. My drill asked if anyone knew how to tie a noose, and I whipped out a perfect one in only a few seconds. He just looked at me and said, "Private. What the fuck?" Interrogating someone without them knowing. I was at a school thing, and one of my girl classmates really liked a guy, but was too nervous to talk to him. She asked me to figure out some of his info, and I ended up getting first name, last name, school, hobbies, and grade level. She was happy, but more than a little creeped out about how casually I did it. So, by an incidental combination of being a gearhead and at one time a tow truck driver, I am a little more observant when it comes to cars than most. I also have a knack for numbers and memorizing things unintentionally. I've stopped mentioning to people that I saw their car somewhere or other, the movies for example. It's awkward explaining that I know your plate and can spot your pause center from across the parking lot. I look at license plates. I don't know why, but it's every day for me. But for some reason I pretty much had the license plate of the girl I liked memorized. It was easy to remember, and we worked the same place together every day, so I saw it a lot. One time I almost slipped and said, "Hey, where you are driving out in today?" and almost mentioned that the truck's license plate looked just like hers. Not me, but someone I know once mentioned to me back in their high school days, they were suspected of being a snitch, because they would always be inclined to leave right before the bust happened. It wasn't that the guy was a snitch. He'd say that sometimes he just got a feeling, or he knew when a party was just dead. Some sort of sixth sense for this. Every time he got around to leaving, his buddies would usually follow suit, since they were usually the ones dealing anyways. I always have anything I'll need in my handbag. Always. Need a fire. I have 3 different kinds of fire starter. Need a bandage. Do you want sterile or non-sterile? Because I have both. Need a sample of rock analyzed. I have a few little tricks and sufficient tools that I can tell you which region it most likely came from in my own large country, or alternatively I can tell you which country it most likely came from outside of mine, including the moon or Mars. Need to poison your nemesis in a sitcom-style murder attempt. Though it's not usually for murder, I do happen to carry a bunch of poisons with me. Need to perform surgery. I have all the sterile tools I'd need in a pinch, and I'm a straight-A medical student. Need to open up a car. I have multiple different screwdrivers of all sizes, pliers, a small saw, magnets, you name it, I've probably got it. Need to rescue someone from a precipice. I have a 550 pounds paracord in my bag. Sudden pains from the impromptu surgery. Don't worry, there are prescription strength painkillers in there too. I have a chronic illness, so they're legally on a prescription. Need to give a math lecture. I always have at least one scientific calculator, and often a graphing calculator. Not always, it's too heavy. My handbag is really well stocked. It also has more normal things like aspirin and tampons and lippy and shit too, but you'd be amazed how often I've needed to use the more extreme kinds of stuff in there too. People get creeped out a little when they jokingly ask, "Hey, does anyone have X?" And I go, "Oh yeah," hand X over and give 'em 2 minutes. I have an extremely hard time tuning out other people's conversation, so if I'm in a room with a group of people all having different convos, I can pretty much be able to listen to them all at once without it jumbled. So sometimes I would know what people watch, or like, or don't like because of this. It comes off as eavesdropping, but in reality, I can't help it. So, when I give or talk to people about common interest, they seem surprised. Certain types of cleaning. A few years ago, I was at work, and someone dropped a coffee pot that shattered everywhere. So, glass and liquid were in a pretty good sized area. Me and my buddy left to get a mop bucket and a broom. We didn't go long. Another co-worker of ours stayed to pick up some of the glass, even though we told him not to do it barehanded. When we got back, he was wiping down a doorknob, and we asked him why he was doing that. As we walked into the room, the entire mess was gone. When we turned around, he had disappeared from the room. The trash had a new bag in it, and there was no trace of anyone ever being there. So, in the 4 to 5 minutes it took us to get supplies and fill up a mop bucket, this kid got all the glass shards, cleared the counter and floor of coffee, taken all the trash out, and wiped down a doorknob. He should have been a custodian, but he could have been a murderer. Being sneaky. Many times in my life I've accidentally sneaked up on people at work or in stores. I get some really weird looks from people sometimes. Like, where the F did you come from looks around a lot of items. I intentionally cough, sniff or shuffle my feet so I don't scare people. Sometimes I hear other people walking and it sounds like they're stomping around like they're mad, but they just walk like that normally. I have the drug resistance of a god, but I'm not someone who abuses drugs. I can pop T3s like candy. I have been on morphine via IV and didn't feel it. I can drink a ton of caffeine or alcohol and not even feel it. One time I drank a 40 of Jaeger entirely in Jaeger bombs at a party, and still didn't black out or throw up, and I wasn't even one of the drunk ones at the party. It's only for certain medications though. There are a few medications, like sleeping pills, where I get completely out of it on a low dose. Anything to deal with pain or anxiety, or a lot of other things, I end up not even feeling them. Now when I go to the hospital and the nurses in there see how high my drug tolerance is when I claim I'm in pain, they get very bitter and upset. They think I'm faking pain and I'm a junkie after drugs. One nurse refused to give me my medication when I was dying of E. coli. I ended up hospitalized for almost 2 weeks. The nurse was in the ER when I first went in, and she saw I was in and then sent home 3 times in the previous few days, and saw the drugs I was given, and thought I was faking it. She would be late to give my medication by about an hour, and then would do shit like conveniently go on break after she was 1h late for another hour. Then after she got back, she would wait another half hour before coming back to give me medication. My parents were in the room with me and described the way she came in and gave me my hydromorphone as her walking through the door with the needle in hand. Taking 3 steps to cross the room, hitting me with the needle hard enough that my parents could hear a small thud, slamming her hand on the end of the needle, then walking out of the room, all in under 10 seconds. I was in so much pain I don't remember it quite well. They lodged a complaint with my family doctor about her. In the end she only gave me medication 3 times in about 18 hours, 6 p.m. noon, before my parents and family doctor blew up enough to have me moved to another unit. 2 of those 3 times were another nurse that took over for her the next morning. In that time period I was supposed to get 1 medication every 3 hours and another one every 6. So, I only got 1/3 of the medication the doctors prescribed. Googling. I did some journalism and it in college and work as a programmer, so I'm decently good at knowing what search terms to use. If you don't do extra work to guard your identity and have any distinguishing factors, uncommon name being the easiest, I can probably find out where you live within 5 to 10 minutes. Once after listening to a true story on the radio from 10-20 years ago, I had already found out whether the couple in this story were still together. They jointly own an apartment these days, before I realized I was being creepy. Another time a coworker and I were doing the I know where you live joke. We live in the same complex, and he pointed out he could go to his parents' house, and I don't know where they live. I showed him that in 5 minutes, I not only knew where they lived, but their names and some of his siblings' names. I never used my powers for evil, but it still is a little creepy. In dance there's a term called visual silence, which is just what it sounds like, a total lack of movement to a point where the audience is getting no new stimulus from movement. To accomplish this, you have to find a point of relaxation and engagement. Every day we sit still or stand still while listening to someone, but it becomes very suspicious when you are actually suddenly a mannequin. Why isn't he moving? He's just smiling and staring into the distance. WTF. Apparently, filling in forms. I was applying for a job once, and the recruiting agency wanted me to log on to their application system, and fill in a bunch of information on a whole cartload of online forms, and do a whole lot of little tests of typing speed and basic kindergarten level aptitude and logic tests. Standard bullshit. As I was hanging up the phone with them to begin looking at the test, the recruiter lady mentioned that the tests had a time limit, so don't take too long. Damn it, I hate being rushed. But I jumped on and started them anyway. I was about 2/3 through and 20 minutes in when I got a phone call from family. The kind of call where you just cannot get the other person off the phone. It went on and on and on. Half an hour later, I finally got rid of them and went back to the test, doing the last 10 minutes worth and submitting. Now the test suite would show you your progress by showing you a little fake trophy room with a bunch of little fake trophies, one for each section completed, and so I had a screen full of little fake gold cups and whatnot. But between when I'd started and when I'd finished, 60 minutes had passed because of the phone call, when there was really only 30 minutes of work involved, and I was kind of worried that this would reflect badly on me, even though it wasn't my fault. So, I rang up the recruiter lady and told her I had finished the tests. You can't have finished the tests. Why? Because the time limit to complete them is 60 hours and no one's ever done it in less than 30. Do the rest of the tests, you must have missed most of them. I don't know what to say. Look at my fake trophy room, which you can see with your supervisor's testing ID. It's full. I have all the trophies. There is literally nothing more I can do. Check the answers to all the questions and the contents of all the forms if you don't believe me. You must not have done it right. I'm erasing all the trophies and forms. Do everything again. Bitch. So, 30 minutes later, I phoned her again and asked her to check and confirm that my trophy page was, indeed, once again full. She still didn't believe that I'd done everything without some kind of voodoo, but apparently didn't want to have me repeatedly phoning her back twice an hour saying, I've done it all again. So fortunately at that point, she kicked it upstairs to someone who gave not a single crap how long the forms had taken to fill out. I mean, gosh, it's not like I had an entire CV full of experience of working in government with pretty much exactly the same kinds of forms, and therefore had almost all the information they wanted already stored and ready to be cut and pasted, rather than having to go research each item for an hour or so. And it's not like she could have trivially checked that, being a recruiter with a fresh copy of my CV to hand. No, it was much easier to just assume I had somehow fooled their computer system into magically generating all the right answers for me out of thin air. Because that makes much more sense. Honestly, your job. I work as a consultant, which means I set my own schedule. If a client sets me up with some office space, cool. The problem is that the rank and file don't understand the nature of the arrangement. They see a dude with an office who only works 2 days each week, and they start to get jelly. It starts by complaining among themselves that I'm never here, then it becomes complain about whatever will stick. They just cannot fathom someone accomplishing more in a few hours than they do all week. Like, I didn't get where I was by watching the clock and dragging my feet, plebs. I always say that I like to remember my romantic partners by their scent, skin texture and flavor. No one believed me. One day we were chilling on the street, and someone came from behind me and covered my eyes without a word. My friend said, "You'll never know who it is." I sniffed a perfume, always use the same dose, not too subtle, not too much, and said her name. She was my ex from some years ago. Everyone looked at me as if I was some kind of police dog. Another one asked me what I missed most from her, and I said caressing her burn marks in her wrist arms. People thought it was kind of a fetish, but when I met her, she had something like a trauma, thinking that people would be put down by her scars, so it meant a world to her self-esteem. In the UK, knowledge of guns. Over the course of my life, I played a fecaloid of shooters, and learned guns. Then I realized guns are cool and looked into them more. I did shoot for a while, army cadets, use a few whilst I visited the States once, and other stuff. It was recently in my college that we were watching The Man from UNCLE for my media studies course, and my tutor asked us what made the sets believable. I mentioned that the guards in one of the facilities had Walther MPLs, one of Walther's surprisingly unsuccessful entries into the SMG market, and that the film's prop master got it right in that the forces would likely have had them. When she pressed on for some contrived reason, I had to explain that the guns were primarily bought up by private security contractors and security companies, which meant that the prop master also had to get hold of prop firearms from each individual country for any scene. So now, whenever we watch through an action film or anything containing a gun, enemy at the gates next, woo, my tutor takes it as time to quiz Oklahoma about weapons, and it culminates in me being called a school shooter by some whiny bitch. I'm pretty good with numbers and memorization. Sometimes people will give me a phone number, and act all weirded out when I don't write it down or enter it into my phone. When I recite it back, it's like I'm speaking an ancient Viking curse. People get so shocked. The best one is credit cards though. Show me a glimpse of it for 2 seconds, and I can recite back the number and expiration date. People don't find that one so funny. I worked at a food service establishment that did delivery, and we took credit card numbers over the phone to pay for some orders. After working there for a few months and taking orders from our regular customers, I started to remember some of their card numbers, and I would type them in, while they were still reading them to me to save time. I figured it was a nice personal touch to remember their name and address based on the caller ID. I was a driver as well, so I knew how to get to everyone's place, but a few times I had to stop myself from going, "It's okay, I remember," when they were ready to pay. I unintentionally eavesdrop constantly. I have been accused of having ears like a bat by my students, because I'll be in conversation with one kid, and can pause to yell at another kid about cursing, cheating, asking someone for answers, being generally inappropriate or off task. It's my one weird superpower. I get at minimum 3 to 4 comments a day from kids because they think they are too quiet for me to hear them being shady. Fun story, I was visiting my wife at her office, and someone accidentally threw some important papers into the lock to be shredded bin. Next thing I hear, loudly over the whole office, "Honey, we need you to pick a lock." I am not a locksmith, so I'm sure that looked great to everyone. Crappy lock though, 2 paperclips and a few seconds later and it was opened, papers retied, then unlocked it back, all with an audience. I would not recommend it. Super fun skill to have though.